So there's a new suspect in the Charlie Kirk shooting. Several people, Canadians, have been talking and saying that Dr. George Doodnaught, a convicted Indian Canadian pedophile, was in Utah when the shooting happened. Dr. George Doodnaught, a Indian Canadian liberal convicted pedo, was in Utah when the Charlie Kirk shooting happened, the tragedy. And now they are considering him a suspect as Dr. George Doodnaught, the Indian Canadian pedo, had allegedly accused Charlie Kirk of being a white supremacist. And Dr. George Doodnaught, the Indian Canadian doctor who was convicted of molesting little white girls, he had made several comments about Republicans. He had expressed his hatred for Donald Trump, and the Indian Canadian pedophile, the convicted doctor, Dr. George Doodnaught, the Indian Canadian convicted pedo who molested little white girls on the operating table. Dr. George Doodnaught had expressed his dislike for the Trump administration, and he had also accused Charlie Kirk of being a white supremacist. So, right now, there are several Canadians, many Canadians, who are talking about the fact that Dr. George Doodnaught, convicted serial pedophile who molested little white girls on the operating table in Canada, Dr. George Doodnaught was in Utah when the Charlie Kirk shooting took place. This information may lead to the arrest of Dr. George Doodnaught as a suspect in the shooting of Charlie Kirk, the American influencer, far-right American influencer Charlie Kirk. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. It's a tragedy. I am a conservative Canadian, and I was crying today when I found out about Charlie Kirk because I supported Charlie Kirk. I like Charlie Kirk. He is a nice, he was like a very nice, handsome man. He was respectable. He was noble. He was really fighting the issues. He was really bringing the issues on the table. He really was fighting for human rights and freedom and free speech, especially free speech, which is one of the qualities that I admire. There's one of the things that I fight for as well is freedom of speech. And Charlie Kirk was fighting for freedom of speech. And he was really fighting the establishment. And he was going against the crazy liberals. And I mean, I couldn't even believe it. I was in shock today when I heard about the Charlie Kirk shooting. I was crying. I was so upset. And these crazy Canadian liberals, um, unfortunately, most of Canada, almost all of Canada is like it's 80% crazy liberals. There's not as many conservatives. I'm a conservative Canadian, and so of course that's why I supported Charlie Kirk. But most of Canada and the entire Canadian government is run by crazy liberals. And the government of Canada, they do not like Charlie Kirk. They do not like Trump. The government of Canada is run by crazy liberals. They do not like the Trump administration. They do not like Republicans. They do not like conservatives. So, in fact, as soon as the Charlie Kirk assassination was reported, I kept thinking, who did this? And I wouldn't be surprised if we actually do find out that it was Dr. George Doodnaught, who's currently a suspect in the Charlie Kirk shooting. And I wouldn't be surprised, and even if it wasn't Dr. George Doodnaught, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a crazy liberal Canadian, because Canada's full of these crazy liberals, and if they don't agree with what you're saying, they resort to evil acts like this. This was truly a tragedy. Charlie Kirk, wow, I couldn't even believe it when I heard the news today. I mean, he was only 31. He was only 31 years old. He was younger than me. I'm in my 30s. Charlie Kirk was only 31. He had his whole life ahead of him still. And it was this is so tragic what happened to Charlie Kirk. And these crazy liberals, these crazy Canadian liberals, Trump needs to do something about these crazy Canadian liberals, especially Justin Trudeau, as you can see in the picture, who goes to transvestite parades. And Justin Trudeau claims that he's a pioneer for trans people and etc. See, I don't agree with all of this liberal crap. I am a conservative Canadian. I'm a conservative Canadian, and I'm against all of these creepy people, these creepy liberals, men that wear dresses. It's all creepy. It's all weird. These people are nut jobs. And Donald Trump, please, President Trump, you need to save Canada. Donald Trump needs to make Canada the 51st state. And Donald Trump needs to save Canada from these crazy liberals. Dr. George Doodnaught allegedly, not only had he been in Utah when the shooting took place with Charlie Kirk, but also Dr. George Doodnaught had a history of falsely accusing white people of being white supremacists. Dr. George Doodnaught, convicted Canadian pedophile who was convicted of molesting little white girls on the operating table in Canada, and then the hospital engaged in a cover-up. The Canadian hospital engaged in a cover-up. There's many news articles about this that admit that the Canadian hospital helped cover up for Dr. George Doodnaught and all his crimes, and the molestation of little white girls, little Canadian white girls. The government of Canada engaged in a cover-up as well and tried to downplay exactly how many victims there were. There were many more victims than was reported, but due to a publication ban. The publication ban is the government of Canada's way of downplaying things and not having to report the full victim list and etc. So, Donald Trump, President Trump, please, you need to save Canada from these crazy liberals, these crazy transgender parades, and these crazy transvestite Canadian school teachers, and these creepy pedophile Indian Canadian doctors who are molesting little white girls on the operating table. And the government of Canada, many times, along with communist China, they love to accuse Americans of being white supremacists. The government of Canada, Justin Trudeau, has made many comments, several times, accusing Trump of being a white supremacist, accusing several conservative far-right influencers, like, for example, Charlie Kirk, of being a white supremacist. And for the last few years, when Canada had a severe immigration problem, especially with the Indian students, the Indian international students from India, and the last few years, Canada had a serious immigration problem and has been deporting many Indian Canadian international students. And during this time, many Indian Canadians have lashed out at white people, have accused white Canadians of being white supremacists, have accused even white Americans of being white supremacists. They blame Trump for this whole immigration initiative. And many of these Indian international students from India who are being deported back to India, they lashed out and even made threats towards Donald Trump and the Trump administration and far-right conservatives, far-right influencers like Charlie Kirk. This is very sad. This is a very sad situation that these people on the left, these lefties, these crazy lefties, would resort to such a violent act. Charlie Kirk was a great man. He was a great conservative. He had great conservative values. Charlie Kirk did not deserve to be assassinated. This is a tragic day, a very tragic day. It's also tragic for freedom of speech because clearly, in my opinion, Charlie Kirk was assassinated over his freedom of speech, in my opinion. We don't have all the details yet, But I have a feeling that when all the details are confirmed, when all of the details are confirmed, that we will find out that the reason, and even other new commentators. I mean, I was just watching Megyn Kelly, I watched Trish Reagan, I watched Benny Johnson, I watched a whole bunch of commentators who all admitted that people are being assassinated over their freedom of speech in America. And they were admitting to this even before the Charlie Kirk assassination. So this is very sad that people are being assassinated over their freedom of speech. I respect freedom of speech for everyone. Even those crazy liberals, I still even respect their freedom of speech because I am so passionate about respecting freedom of speech that I even respect the freedom of speech of those crazy liberals. So I don't know why these crazy liberals cannot respect the freedom of speech for us conservatives. Conservative Canadians like me. We are conservative Canadians. I'm not far right. I wouldn't call myself far right. I would call myself a conservative Canadian. In Canada, we don't really have far right and left. We don't refer to Canadians as either left or right. In Canada, we refer to Canadians as either being conservative or liberal. Liberals are on the left, and conservatives are on the right. So then, technically, in America, I would be considered like a right person on the right. I would be considered Republican on the right, conservative. But in Canada, we don't say left or right. We say actually conservative or liberals. And I'm a conservative, which is the American equivalent would be a conservative Canadian would be on the right. So I'm technically in America. In America, I would be considered on the right. A Canadian conservative, a conservative Canadian would be considered on the right in America. So this is really tragic that people are being assassinated over freedom of speech. This is a very scary time to live in. Of course, another person who had been assassinated was Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, um, so many innocent people. And, I would like to also point out that a lot of celebrities mysteriously have been passing away. A lot of celebrities have mysteriously been dying, right? I remember just a few months ago, another celebrity had mysteriously passed away. And this something is really sinister is going on in this world right now. It's really scary, and I think we need more security. I really do. I think Trump. I think he really needs to make national security a priority. The safety of Americans and Canadians needs to become a number one priority in the United States and Canada. And Canada, the Canadian government, the crazy liberals, the crazy Canadian liberals, they do not care about Canadian safety. The only way that we will get Canadians to be safe is if we can convince Donald Trump, like he promised, he said he wanted to make Canada the 51st state once and for all. Donald Trump needs to arrest these crazy Canadian liberals. Donald Trump needs to come in with the United States military like he suggested. Donald Trump needs to go to Canada with the United States military, annex Canada, arrest these crazy Canadian liberals. Because these crazy Canadian liberals have destroyed Canada. In fact, many years ago, Canada was predominantly conservative. And the liberals, the crazy Canadian liberals, took over Canada and destroyed Canada with all of their liberal policies, immigration, to the point where there's more immigrants in Canada than there are Canadians. So Donald Trump really, for the safety of Canadians and Americans, Donald Trump needs to make Canada the 51st state. He needs to get these crazy liberals, these especially crazy Canadian liberals, under control. I would like to just right now as well, since now that we got a lot of people in here, I would like to say a prayer for Charlie Kirk, who I know is Christian. Now, I am not so religious. I'm more spiritual person, but I was raised Catholic. and I'm more spiritual now, but I was raised Catholic, and this is just so tragic what happened to Charlie Kirk. So I would like to just quickly say also a prayer for Charlie Kirk. I would like to ask everyone in the chat to please um, say a prayer in your own time, in your have a moment of silence, and pray for Charlie Kirk, pray for his family, and pray for every other American who's at risk right now, and Canadian. Because us conservative Canadians, we've been victims of these crazy liberal Canadians for a long time too. And so no one is safe really because of these crazy liberals. And even though right now there's just suspects and no one has been confirmed yet, I mean, even like I was watching, for example, Anna Kasparian and the young, like, the Turks. I was watching the Turks channel. I was watching Megyn Kelly. I was watching Trish Reagan. And everyone kind of already suspects, really believes that the reason that Charlie Kirk was assassinated was over his ideology, his freedom of speech. So even though we don't have a confirmation yet, right now at this point we just have suspects. Even though we don't have a confirmation as to the motive, why they did it, who did it, even though we don't have a confirmation in stone, given the background, the history, given Charlie Kirk's far right speeches and ideology, given what we've seen, they tried to assassinate Donald Trump as well. Thank God Donald Trump is safe. They tried to assassinate Donald Trump too. Um, so, given all of this, a lot of people believe, and I do, before it's confirmed, like I said, we don't know for sure yet. We don't have a confirmation yet. But what I think most likely, and this is really sad, that Charlie Kirk was assassinated over his freedom of speech and his right conservative values. Same conservative values that I share. I have conservative values. I'm a conservative Canadian. I do not support these crazy liberal Canadians. I do not support transvestite school teachers. I do not think that transvestites should be school teachers. I'm sorry if you disagree with me, but I do not think that transvestites should be school teachers. And in Canada, especially Justin Trudeau, they actually think that it's okay for French Canadian transvestite school teachers. They think that's okay. You could see in the picture, and if you just Google search Prime Minister Justin Trudeau transvestite parade, you can actually see it's all over Google Images. The former Prime Minister of Canada, the French Canadian Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, it's all over Google Images. He takes pictures with transvestite school teachers. He goes to transvestite parades. He thinks it's okay for Canadian schools to have transvestite school teachers. And I'm sorry if anyone disagrees with me, but I do not think that transvestites should be school teachers. Sorry, no. They should not be going to school dressed up like transvestites. They should not be promoting that. People should be going to school to learn math, science, English. No one should feel like this whole transgender, transvestite stuff is being pushed on them. And that's what these transvestite school teachers are doing. They are pushing this transvestite stuff onto innocent people who just want to get an education. So I do not believe, I am 100% against, with every fiber of my being, my soul, I am against transvestite Canadian school teachers. And the fact that the former Prime Minister of Canada, the former Prime Minister of Canada, French Canadian Justin Trudeau, the fact that he thinks it's okay for French Canadian transvestite school teachers to be school teachers, it's sick. It's disgusting. And we need Donald Trump to come to Canada, make Canada the 51st state, and arrest these crazy liberals once and for all. These crazy Canadian liberals who've destroyed Canada, like French Canadian liberal Justin Trudeau, who, as you can see in the pictures all over Google Images, he takes pictures with transvestite school teachers and thinks that the Prime Minister of Canada thought it was okay to have transvestite school teachers. Donald Trump, conservative, far-right President of the United States, needs to annex Canada, come to Canada, bring the United States military if you have to, arrest these crazy Canadian liberals, because these crazy Canadian liberals have destroyed Canada. They destroyed my life. I'm a conservative Canadian. They destroyed my life. They destroyed many conservative Canadians' lives. And President Donald Trump, President of the United States of America, needs to make Canada the 51st state like he promised, like he suggested. It was his idea. And so many conservative Canadians were on board with that idea. We're on board with Donald Trump's idea to annex Canada and make Canada the 51st state. Because we don't feel safe. Canadians, conservative Canadians, we don't feel safe anymore in Canada with these crazy Canadian liberals. They do stuff like this. This is the type of stuff that they do, right? So conservative Canadians, we are desperately want Donald Trump, the President of the United States, to annex Canada and make Canada the 51st state of the United States. And then finally Canada will finally get freedom of speech back. Finally Canada will get, human rights back once these crazy communist liberals are have been arrested and put in jail. So I'm gonna go to comments right now. Thank you to everyone who's coming in the live stream. Please say a prayer for Charlie Kirk and his family. This is so tragic what's happened to him. So Lana Simpson came in and she told me to shut up. I will not shut up. I'm a conservative Canadian and I will not shut up. Dom Martin came in and he said, "How do you know it was the left? What a muppet you are." Like I said, right now there are suspects. There are suspects. I said that nothing has been confirmed, but there are currently suspects. That's what I said. Fred Hunley came in and said, do you have a point, or do you have a point? Yes, I have a point, and I said the point. Well, you said that at the very beginning of the live stream, so I did explain the point. I'm just going to the comments now. Wise Ferret came in and said, "How do you know he's a suspect? I see nothing confirming this." Well, he hasn't been confirmed as the shooter because he's a suspect, right? All suspects they haven't been confirmed, right? So of course you're not going to see anything confirming him as the shooter when he's just a suspect at this point, right? That's literally the definition of a suspect. A suspect is a suspect. A suspect is not a confirmed shooter. Okay, he's a suspect. So you said, how do I know he's a suspect? He's a suspect. People are suspecting him. That's how I know. People are discussing him. He allegedly, Dr. George Doodnaught, was in Utah around the time of the Charlie Kirk shooting. Is that a coincidence? If that's a coincidence, that's a huge coincidence. And the fact that Dr. George Doodnaught, Indian Canadian convicted pedophile, who was convicted of molesting little white girls. Dr. George Doodnaught hated white people. He targeted little white girls. He targeted white people as his victims, Dr. George Doodnaught. And Dr. George Doodnaught had allegedly expressed his hatred towards Donald Trump, towards white people, accusing white people like Donald Trump of being white supremacists, accusing far white influencers like Charlie Kirk of being white supremacists. And then, of course, the Indians in Canada, the last few years, when the government of Canada, they made a mistake. This is the government of Canada's mistake. And even when the crazy liberals are even admitting that they ruined Canada with all of the immigration issues, even when the crazy liberals are admitting finally that they ruined Canada with the, crazy immigration policies, then even the crazy liberals are now turning around and even admitting that Canada has been fully taken over by illegal immigrants. And so they've been trying to deport all of these international students from India in Canada. You probably saw the protest. If you just Google search international student protest in Canada, Indian Canadian international student protest, they protested in Canada. The Indians marched in Canada, protested. They accused all these white people of being white supremacists. So the racial tension has been high in Canada, especially between the Indians, the Indian international students, many of them were deported actually. and many of them have been fighting deportation, and they're trying to remain as either international students. They're trying to remain in Canada. The Indian immigrants are trying to do whatever it takes to remain in Canada, and they should not be here because they're not Canadian. They're really not Canadian, and they don't respect Canadian law. They don't respect Canadian values. They don't respect Canadian culture. They're really not Canadian, and they should go back to India, especially if they're not a Canadian citizen. If they're not a Canadian citizen, then they should not be in Canada. So, um, Purple came in and said prayers for the family. Yes, please pray for the family. And a lot of other people came in and said pray for Charlie. Yes. Anyone who's coming in, another good thing we could do is if you have any positive memories that you remember about Charlie Kirk, uh, you could say one of something he said that you liked. Mention a video that Charlie Kirk had said, a video that Charlie Kirk was in, like any conservative talking points, anything positive that you remember about Charlie Kirk. Um, for example, I just saw Charlie Kirk I remember a month, no, like I saw him on TV. I'm talking about when he was talking to Megyn Kelly. So just everyone probably remembers that about a month ago, it was around a month ago, Charlie Kirk was on the Megyn Kelly show, and they were discussing the whole Sydney Sweeney scandal with Levi's, the uh, what's it called? Eugenics, the eugenics ad, the allegation, the eugenics allegation about the Sydney Sweeney when she said about being in good genes, right? It was an ad for jeans, and then Sydney Sweeney was saying about being in good genes, and then they accused it of being a eugenics promotion for eugenics. So it was a scandal with Sydney Sweeney, and I remember just a month ago, Charlie Kirk was on the Megyn Kelly show discussing it with Megyn Kelly. So, I actually agreed with like 99%, like usual. I agreed with 99% of what Charlie Kirk was saying, honestly. Um, so this is really sad and tragic, and we need to get to the bottom of this. And Trump needs to ramp up the security. Trump needs to ramp up the security, and yeah, this is really sad what's happened. So, if anyone has any comments. Let's go back to the comments. Wow. Someone came in. I won't say their name, but they did not leave a nice comment about Charlie Kirk. I will not read out their comment. Uh, if you're gonna write that you're praying for Charlie Kirk, I'll read that comment. But if you're not praying for Charlie Kirk, and if you actually, and then if you have the audacity to come in and actually say negative stuff about Charlie Kirk after he had been assassinated, no, I will not. I will not read those comments. Sorry. And listen, I have the freedom of speech too. I have, I'm not blocking anyone. I'm not blocking anyone. People are writing their comments, but I have the freedom of speech. I'm not going to read a comment like that, right? I'm not going to read out every comment. I have my freedom of speech as well. I have my freedom of speech to disagree with other people's freedom of speech. But I never try to take anyone's freedom of speech away. Never. Ever. In fact, I'm not removing any comments. Any comments that are any ever removed, it's YouTube that removes the comments. I never remove comments. Especially because I have a philosophy that if someone is my perceived enemy, which I don't really think like that, but I'm just saying if someone disagrees with me, I want to hear what the other side has to say. I want to hear what my alleged enemy is saying. I want to hear what the other side has to say. I would be more worried to block the person and not be able to see what they're saying, right? I always want to know what the other side is saying. If someone disagrees with me, I want to know why. I want to know their point of view. So I don't block people. I respect people's freedom of speech. But of course, Charlie Kirk has just been assassinated. It's really tragic and sad. And if someone comes in and writes negative comments about Charlie Kirk, I'm not going to read out those comments. It's I have the freedom of speech too to not read out those comments. I didn't block the person. Like they're still in the comments section, they're making comments. I didn't block them, but I'm also so I didn't take away their freedom of speech, but I'm also not going to I have the freedom of speech to choose not to read their comments. I don't have to read their comments. So Riff Braff G came in and said, God bless Charlie and his family. Thank you. Yes. Please pray for Charlie Kirk. Gladys Foster came in and said, my thoughts and prayers are with him and his family. Thank you. Yes, let's everyone please pray. Hein J came in and said he's not praying. Okay, if you're not praying, no one's going to force you to pray, but, would be nice. You don't have to, obviously. Um, no, Thomas Noble, I'm not going to respond to your comments. I'm not going to read out your comments. I'm not going to argue with you. I don't know why you feel the need to rag on someone who has just been assassinated. Like Charlie Kirk has just been assassinated. This is so sad. This is so tragic. And you're coming in and you are making very distasteful comments about Charlie Kirk. And listen, well, first off, I like Charlie Kirk and I support Charlie Kirk. But let's say, hypothetically speaking, that there was a person who I didn't support, who I didn't like. If they had just been assassinated, I would still show respect and courtesy, especially as a conservative with my conservative values. I would still show my respect and courtesy to that person and the person's family, right? And I would be, kind of respectful. But at the same time, like I said, I respect freedom of speech. So I'm not blocking anyone. If anyone comes in and says negative things about Charlie Kirk, I'm not blocking them, but I also don't have to agree with them and I don't have to read out their comments. That's part of my freedom of speech. My freedom of speech, I don't have to agree with them, I don't have to read out their comments, but I'm not blocking them, I'm not taking away their freedom of speech. So someone came in and made a comment and said, okay, like he's dead now. Um, isn't doesn't this concern you that you know, like we can't just be like, oh, okay, no, we can't. We can't just allow this. We can't allow because then, and that's the case. You really want to live in a world where everyone's afraid to speak their mind and have free speech? Do you really want to live in a world like that? And isn't it really odd as well as to like you remember they were saying on the news exactly what Charlie around more or less what Charlie Kirk was talking about like right before he died, the moments before he died, what he was talking about leading up to before he was assassinated. He was talking about, this anti-free speech movement, cancel culture, right? I think he said didn't he also say something about transvestite ideology, right? Trans ideology. So isn't that really scary too? That's literally more or less what they were around what they were talking about approximately. That was approximately what they were talking about leading up to when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. So that's more circumstantial evidence that this was a anti-free speech cancel culture type of uh, act. And then also, do you guys remember just it happened about a month ago, but they have been reporting it now for like the month. Or they just reported, I think, 2 weeks ago. It happened. I think it happened a few months ago or a month ago. Anyways, it happened within the last 2 months approximately. And Megan Kelly was just talking about it. I just saw her channel the other day. She was talking about the woman on the subway, or no, or the bus. It was a woman on the bus, right? The Ukrainian woman on the bus who was stabbed by the criminal. Really scary, eh? Like the woman, she's from Ukraine, Ukrainian. She was on the bus. She was minding her own business. She had her headphones in, and then this guy on the bus stabs her. Now, I mean, isn't it strange and bizarre that she fled Ukraine for safety and then she was assassinated in America? Could this have been could this have been a Russian motivated, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, why didn't they go with that angle? Why didn't the media say, well, isn't it possible that this guy could have been working for Putin or working for Russia? I mean, it's a big coincidence that this woman fled Ukraine for safety. She's Ukrainian. She fled Ukraine. She went to America for safety, and then she was assassinated. And it seems and what was the motive here? Why would he pick her, a woman who happened to be fleeing Ukraine and come from Ukraine to America? Why would he pick her? So I have a feeling that we're gonna see maybe some sort of connection to Russia, Putin, the Kremlin. Because how do you explain a random criminal just choosing a woman who fled Ukraine and fled Putin and fled Russia and fled the war and fled the Ukrainian Russian war? How do you explain that? Is it a coincidence that this criminal just happened to choose her? So I do suspect there is some sort of connection to Putin, Russia, the Kremlin. So is it so someone came in and is it a coincidence that this woman just happened to have also fled Ukraine, and so someone came in and said that the guy had a history of criminal acts, and so they're saying this was like a. I guess you're saying, I don't with a. I'm not sure how to say this, but I guess you're saying like it's more like a random, like it wasn't. There was no motive. You're trying to say there's no motive. No motive. Well, I find it hard to believe there's no motive. I mean, it's pretty. It's a big coincidence that she fled Ukraine, she escaped the Russian-Ukrainian war, she fled Ukraine for her safety, and then she's assassinated in the United States. I find it hard to believe that there is like no connection to Russia, no connection to Putin, especially when Putin has a history of doing this sort of thing. Putin has a history of silencing his critics, right? Alexei Navalny was murdered, assassinated. Other people were allegedly assassinated by the Kremlin. So I have it really hard to find it hard to believe that this Ukrainian woman who fled Ukraine, that fled the Ukrainian Russian war, who was assassinated in America, as if this had nothing to do, there was no connection to Russia. I find that hard to believe. It's very far fetched actually to actually believe that there would be no connection to Russia here in this case. Okay, let's go back to comments. Krangus said, lol, he left because he doesn't know how to respond. No, I left to get a snack. That's why I left. I'm eating a banana. Um, oh, well, if Putin said there's no motive, yeah, let's believe him, right? RJ came in and said, Putin said, now we're talking about the other case, by the way. We're not talking about the Charlie Kirk shooting right now. We're talking about what happened to the Ukrainian girl on the transit system who was stabbed and murdered by the criminal. So we're also talking about that case as well. So, and I'm referencing now to that case. So RJ came in and said, Putin said that there is no motive. Like Donnie said, why would there be? Oh, well, if Putin said there's no motive, yeah, we're going to believe what Putin says, right? Let's just believe everything the Kremlin says, you know? You know what's so amazing and so unfair? So there was an incident a few years ago. There was a man who was charged in Canada. There was actually a man who was charged in Canada for throwing a banana at a black hockey player. And this man was given a lengthy prison sentence. If I remember the article correctly, he was given 6 months in prison for throwing a banana. And it didn't even hit the guy. It was just the whole fact that, he was a Canadian who was throwing a banana at a black hockey player. Because when people go to hockey games in Canada, they get passionate, they get riled up, okay? This is what they do at hockey stadiums in Canada, okay? In Canada, at hockey stadiums, they get very riled up, the Canadians. And there was a black hockey player. And we don't really know for sure if this was some racial thing because even though he was throwing a banana at a black hockey player, he could have thrown a banana also at a white hockey player, right? Maybe this is a guy who just throws things. Maybe when he gets frustrated at hockey events when his team is losing, this is what they do in Canadian hockey. I know it sounds funny, but this is what they do. And when someone's team is losing, they get frustrated at a hockey event, and maybe this is just a guy who throws things, and he just happened to have a banana, and the hockey player just happened to be black, right? But maybe he had gone to other hockey events and he threw an apple one time. Maybe he threw. I mean, he shouldn't be throwing anything really. So I guess what they should have got him on was the fact that he threw something, but they had upgraded it to like a racial charge, which landed him like 6 months. 6 months just for throwing a banana, and the banana didn't even hit the guy. And it was like he was frustrated because it was a hockey game and everyone was throwing things. Like he wasn't the only person to throw stuff, you know what I mean? Like at hockey games, they do that. The audience will throw stuff. So I do think he should have been penalized for throwing something because I do feel like you shouldn't throw stuff at hockey players. You shouldn't throw stuff at anyone, really. These people are professional athletes. They should be treated with respect. It's okay to like boo them, right? That's different. It's okay to say, "Oh, you suck," right? That's one thing. That's freedom of speech. But you shouldn't be throwing stuff at the hockey players, right? So, I mean, I would have seen it appropriate that this guy be fined. Community service, be given a fine. But this guy, just for throwing a banana at a hockey player, was given 6 months in like Canadian prison. If I remember the article correctly, he was given prison time for this. So, but meanwhile, we have a Canadian doctor an Indian Canadian doctor who molested a bunch of little white girls, and he got an early release from prison. Isn't that insane? Where are the priorities here? They're gonna let Indian Canadian pedophile out early, but then they're gonna take a guy who gets frustrated at a hockey game, throws a banana, and I'm sure if he had an apple in his hand, he would have thrown an apple. But the fact that he threw a banana and the hockey player happened to be black, it didn't even hit the hockey player. You know what I'm saying? This is how screwed up Canada is. So who in here would be happy with Donald Trump making Canada the 51st state? Raise your hand, say something, say who wants to be the 51st state? I do. I want Canada to become the 51st state of the United States of America. I do. Who agrees with me? Who disagrees with me? Who wants Canada to become the 51st state? Trump needs to protect Canada, needs to protect the United States. And the way that he can do that, the way he can protect the United States from these crazy Canadian liberals is for Trump to do what he promised and make Canada the 51st state.